Welcome to another deep dive, everyone. Today we're going deep on the science of attraction.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, it should be really interesting. We'll be looking at the biology like hormones, brain wiring, all that good stuff.
Yeah, all the nitty-gritty.
Exactly. And we've got a ton of research to dig through, from journal articles and case studies to even animal research.
So much cool stuff to uncover.
I know, right? But before we jump in, let me ask you something.
Sure, go for it.
When you hear the science of attraction, what comes to mind?
Well, I think about how we often think about love as this magical thing.
Yeah, like it's all about destiny and fate.
Right, but the reality is a lot more grounded and
Biological,
exactly. It all starts with our brains.
even before we're born.
Yeah. Like you see hormones playing a crucial role in shaping our brains and gender identity even before we're born.
That reminds me of the David Reimer case.
Oh yeah, the boy raised as a girl after that.
Botched circumcision.
Right.
Ah,
Tragic case. But it was so important for understanding how sex and gender aren't just about how we're raised.
like nature versus nurture.
Yeah, and it turns out nature has a pretty strong influence.
And there was that other case too, right? The
Yeah.
one with,
The Machihembra,
yes, those individuals in the Dominican Republic.
they were raised as girls but developed male characteristics at puberty.
Such a powerful example of biology at work.
It really shows that there's more to gender identity than just social influences.
So where does this whole organizational hypothesis fit in? I've heard that term before.
So the organizational hypothesis basically says that being exposed to testosterone in the womb lays the groundwork for what we think of as male typical brain development.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And is that where the SDN comes in?
Yes. The SDN, the sexually dimorphic nucleus, is this area in the hypothalamus.
And it's bigger in males, right?
Exactly. And it's been linked to sexual behavior.
Wow. So there's actually a physical difference in the brain that can be linked to attraction.
It's pretty amazing. And it's not just in humans either. Studies with guinea pigs and rhesus monkeys showed that female offspring exposed to more testosterone display male typical behaviors even if they have female genitalia.
So this is something that goes beyond just us humans.
It seems to be a fundamental biological principle across many species.
So does that mean we're basically hardwired for certain attractions from birth?
Well, not necessarily. It's more like our brains are set up with a certain blueprint, but that doesn't mean everything's predetermined. Hormones continue to influence our behavior throughout our lives.
That makes sense. I
Yeah.
mean, we all know how much hormones can affect us, even as adults.
Exactly. And those hormonal shifts can have a pretty big impact on who we're attracted to.
Like how?
Well, there's a fascinating study at the University of Minnesota that looked at this.
Oh, what did they find?
They found that women who were ovulating were more likely to flirt with the stereotypical bad boy type.
Really? Even if that might not be the best long-term choice.
Yep. It seems like those hormonal shifts during ovulation can make women more receptive to certain cues that might signal strength and good genes.
From an evolutionary perspective, I guess that makes sense.
Right, like maybe back in the day, a bad boy might have been more likely to provide and protect.
Interesting. But in today's world, I'm not sure that always holds true.
You've got a point there. It's amazing how these ancient biological drives can still influence us, even when they might not be as relevant anymore.
It really shows how much of our behavior is driven by forces we might not even be aware of.
Exactly. And speaking of powerful forces, we can't forget about the brain's reward system.
Oh yeah, that's a big one. Is that like the part of our brain that gives us a gold star when we do something good?
It's more like your brain giving you a feel-good signal. Researchers discovered the system back in the 1950s, and it plays a huge role in what we're attracted to.
Okay, so how does it work?
Basically, things that are pleasurable, like eating certain drugs and, yes, even sexual behavior, activate this reward system, causing a release of dopamine and opioids.
Those are the chemicals that make us feel good.
Exactly.
Okay.
And when we feel good, we want to repeat those behaviors.
So it's a positive feedback loop.
Mhm.
We seek out what makes us feel good, and then when we get it, we want more of it.
You got it. And this applies to attraction, too. We often associate places, objects, even specific people with past pleasurable experiences.
And those associations can lead to even stronger preferences, right?
Yes, they can even lead to fetishes. There's a researcher named Jim Faust who's done some pretty interesting work with rats, looking at how these associations develop.
Oh yeah, I've heard of him. He's the one who did those experiments with the,
The smell of death.
yeah, that's the one. Didn't he find that male rats who had their first sexual experiences in an environment with the smell of death later showed a preference for mates associated with that smell?
Exactly. It sounds strange, but it just goes to show how powerful conditioning can be. Our brains can link seemingly unrelated things to pleasure and reward.
So sometimes it's not even a conscious choice. Our brains are making these connections behind the scenes.
It's a fascinating and complex process, for sure. And it raises some important questions about how much control we really have over our attractions.
Yeah, like are we always at the mercy of these unconscious drives? Or do we have some say in the matter?
That's where things get even more interesting because it's not just about those basic drives. There's also a tension between our desires and our rational decision making.
You mean like the battle between what we want and what we should do? So
Exactly.
it's like that classic dilemma.
Yeah.
You see a big piece of chocolate cake and,
Yeah.
you should be eating salad, but
But the cake is just calling your name.
exactly, it's that battle between our rational side and
And those powerful urges coming from the limbic system.
that's the part of the brain that's all about emotions and pleasure.
Right. And it's heavily influenced by dopamine, that feel-good chemical.
So it's like our brain is giving us mixed signals. One part saying be responsible and the other saying go for the pleasure.
And sometimes that pleasure signal is just too strong to ignore.
Do we know why that is?
Oh,
Like
yeah.
why can't we always control those urges?
Well, it seems like the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for planning and decision-making, can actually be overridden by those urges coming from the limbic system.
So it's like our rational side gets hijacked by the desire for immediate gratification.
Yeah, and it's something we all experience to some degree, but some people really struggle with it.
Like those cases you mentioned earlier with the judge and the medieval lovers.
Exactly. Judge Edward Camp is a perfect example. He had a successful career and everything, but his inability to control his sexual desires ended up derailing his whole life.
And Abelard and Heloise, their story is so tragic, but it shows that this battle between desire and reason is something that's been around forever.
Absolutely. It's a conflict that's deeply ingrained in our biology.
Makes you wonder if it's even possible to completely escape it.
That's a good question. Maybe it's more about learning to manage it, finding a balance between those drives and our conscious choices.
So it's like we need to develop a better relationship with our own biology.
Exactly. Understanding how these systems work can help us make more informed choices.
Well, speaking of fascinating biology, have you ever heard of the mommy circuit?
Oh, yes. That's a really interesting one. It's this network in the brain that's responsible for maternal behavior.
I think it's really relevant to our conversation about attraction and bonding.
It definitely ties in. It's all about how we form those deep connections with others.
So tell me more about this mommy circuit. How does it work?
Well, it's primarily driven by hormones like oxytocin and prolactin, which are essential for nurturing offspring.
And those hormones are present in both men and women, right?
Yes, but they tend to be more prominent in women, especially during and after pregnancy.
Makes sense. So how do these hormones actually create those nurturing instincts?
Studies with rats have shown that these hormones can actually induce maternal behavior even in virgin females.
Wow. So you're saying that just by introducing these hormones, you can make a rat who's never had babies start acting like a mother.
It's pretty amazing, right? It shows how powerful those hormonal influences can be.
But it's not all about blind instinct, is it? There's also a learning component, right?
Definitely sensory cues from babies, like their smell or cry, actually activate the reward system in mothers.
Oh, so it's like those caregiving behaviors are actually reinforcing themselves.
Exactly. It creates this positive feedback loop. The mother gets rewarded for taking care of her baby, and that makes her want to keep doing it.
It makes you appreciate how interconnected we are, even at a biological level.
I know, it's really beautiful when you think about it, but it also makes you wonder what happens when this system is disrupted.
Like what happens if a mother and child are separated, or if there are other challenges to bonding?
Well, it can have a pretty big impact on both the mother and the child.
Like that case we talked about earlier with Maria, the Romanian orphan.
Yes, she was adopted into a loving family, but she still struggled with social and emotional difficulties because of that early deprivation.
It's a heartbreaking example of how crucial those early bonding experiences are.
It really highlights the importance of those early years and how they can shape our development.
Are there things parents can do to support the development of this mommy circuit?
There's research suggesting that breastfeeding and vaginal birth can have a positive impact on the development of this system in humans.
Makes sense those experiences would release a flood of those bonding hormones.
Exactly. And skin-to-skin contact is also important. It helps to create that sense of closeness and security.
So it's not just about providing food and shelter, but also about those specific interactions that shape the brain during those early years.
Right. Those early experiences lay the foundation for how we relate to others throughout our lives.
And that brings us to the concept of attachment styles. The idea that our early experiences with caregivers shape how we form relationships as adults.
Attachment styles are like a blueprint for how we connect with others.
And there are different types of attachment styles, right?
Yeah, the main ones are secure, anxious, and avoidant.
Can you explain a little more about each of those?
Sure, so people with a secure attachment style tend to feel comfortable with intimacy and closeness. They're able to trust others and don't worry too much about being abandoned.
Sounds pretty
Yeah,
healthy.
it is. It's the ideal attachment style. People with an anxious attachment style, on the other hand, tend to be more preoccupied with relationships. They worry about whether their partner truly loves them, and they often fear being abandoned.
So they're a little more clingy and insecure.
Yeah, you could say that. And then there's the avoidant attachment style. These folks tend to be uncomfortable with intimacy and closeness. They often have a hard time trusting others, and they may push people away.
So it's like they're afraid of getting too close.
Yeah, they're more comfortable with emotional distance.
Makes sense. So how do these attachment styles actually develop?
It all goes back to those early experiences with caregivers. If a child's needs are consistently met and they feel safe and secure, they're more likely to develop a secure attachment style.
But if their needs aren't met, or if they experience trauma or neglect,
They're more likely to develop one of the insecure attachment styles.
and the attachment styles can have a big impact on our adult relationships, right?
Absolutely. They can influence how we choose partners,
Yeah.
how we communicate, and how we handle conflict.
So it's like those early patterns get imprinted on our brains, and we carry them with us into adulthood.
Yeah, it's pretty powerful stuff. But the good news is that even if we didn't have the best start in life, we can still learn to develop more secure attachment patterns.
So there's hope for those of us who maybe didn't win the attachment lottery.
Definitely. Therapy can be really helpful for understanding our attachment styles and learning new ways of relating to others.
And I bet mindfulness practices can help too, just becoming more aware of our own patterns and triggers.
Absolutely. Self-awareness is key. The more we understand ourselves, the better equipped we are to create healthy and fulfilling relationships.
Well, this is all fascinating stuff, but it makes me think about the whole nature versus nurture debate. If our early experiences have such a big impact on our attachment styles and ultimately our relationships, doesn't that mean we're basically predetermined?
That's a great question, and it's one that researchers are still exploring. But here's the thing. While our genes and our early experiences certainly play a role, we're not just passive recipients of these influences. We also have the power to shape our own lives.
So you're saying we have free will.
I believe we do. We have the ability to make choices, to learn and grow, and to break free from those early patterns if they're not serving us.
So it's not all doom and gloom. There's hope for change.
Absolutely. And that's where the concept of epigenetics comes in.
Oh, yeah, we talked about that earlier. It's the idea that our experiences can actually change our genes.
Right, exactly. It's like a dimmer switch that can turn gene activity up or down.
So even though we inherit our genes from our parents, our experiences can influence how those genes are expressed.
Right, and this can have a big impact on our health, our behavior, and even our relationships.
I'm still wrapping my head around this whole epigenetics thing. Do you have an example that might help me understand it better?
Sure. Let's look at the work of Frances Champagne. She's a researcher who studied maternal behavior in rats.
Okay, what did she find?
She found that rats raised by high-licking and grooming mothers were more likely to become high-licking and grooming mothers themselves.
So the nurturing behavior was passed down from one generation to the next?
Yeah.
But was it just because they inherited those genes?
Not necessarily. The difference was in how those genes were expressed. Specifically, there were changes in the methylation of genes related to oxytocin receptors.
Wait, so you're saying that the nurturing behavior of the mothers actually created a biological change in their offspring that made them more likely to be nurturing themselves?
Exactly. It's kind of a chain reaction. And it shows how intertwined nature and nurture really are.
It's like we're not just shaped by our genes, but by our experiences as well.
Right. It's this beautiful interplay between our biology and our environment.
That's a pretty powerful concept. But if we're talking about the science of attraction, we can't ignore the fact that we're not just biological creatures, right? We live in a social world with all sorts of cultural influences.
Oh, absolutely. Culture plays a huge role in shaping our beliefs, our values, and even our attractions.
So it's not just about biology. It's about understanding how biology and culture interact.
Right. It's this complex tapestry of influences.
So how do researchers even begin to untangle all of this? How do they figure out what's nature and what's nurture?
Well, it's not easy, but there are ways to study these things. For example, they can look at how people from different cultures view attractiveness or how certain behaviors change depending on the social context.
So it's about looking for patterns and variations across different groups of people.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that there's no one-size-fits-all explanation. Human behavior is incredibly diverse and complex.
That's for sure. So with all this talk about biological influences, it makes me think about the whole debate about whether men are more visually driven when it comes to attraction. Is there any scientific basis for that claim?
There's some evidence to support that idea. Studies have shown that men on average tend to have a stronger physiological response to visual sexual stimuli compared to women.
So there might be some truth to those stereotypes about guys being easily distracted by a pretty face.
Maybe. But it's important to remember that this doesn't mean men are only interested in looks.
Right. Other factors like personality, intelligence, and shared values also play a huge role.
Exactly. It's about the whole package.
And women are visually oriented too, right? It's not like they're completely immune to physical attraction.
Absolutely. Women are also visually oriented, but the interplay of hormones and brain circuitry might lead to different patterns of response between the sexes.
Okay, so it's not about saying one gender is more superficial than the other. It's about understanding those differences without resorting to harmful stereotypes.
Exactly. It's about appreciating the complexity of human attraction and acknowledging that there's no one-size-fits-all explanation.
Well said. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, from prenatal development to complex adult relationships and everything in between.
Mm.
If we had to boil it down, what's the biggest takeaway from all this research on attraction?
I think the most important insight is that attraction isn't simply a matter of chance or completely under our conscious control. It's a process with many layers deeply rooted in our biology, influenced by hormones, brain development, early experiences, and even our genes.
So we've got nature and nurture working together, shaping our desires and behaviors.
Precisely. And while understanding these biological underpinnings might seem to take some of the mystery out of love, I think it actually makes it even more fascinating.
I agree. It makes you appreciate the complexity of it all. But it also raises some big questions. If biology plays such a big role, does that mean we can consciously change our patterns of attraction and behavior? Is that even possible?
That's a fantastic question, and it's one that researchers are still exploring. There's some promising evidence emerging that mindfulness practices therapy and even certain medications can influence our brain chemistry and potentially shift our behavior.
So it's not a hopeless situation.
Right.
We can learn more about ourselves and make positive changes. It's not all predetermined.
Absolutely. And that's where the intersection of science, psychology, and personal growth gets really exciting.
So we're not just puppets controlled by our biology. We have the power to understand ourselves better and make different choices.
That's a key point.
Yeah.
And it brings us to another fascinating aspect of this topic, the evolutionary perspective.
Evolution, like survival of the fittest and all that. What does that have to do with love and relationships?
Well, from an evolutionary standpoint, the main purpose of attraction is successful reproduction, passing on our genes to the next generation.
So on a very basic level, it's all about making babies.
In a nutshell, yes. But of course, it's much more nuanced than that. Over thousands of years, humans have evolved to be drawn to certain traits in potential mates that would have increased the likelihood of having healthy offspring.
Like physical attractiveness, strength, intelligence, those kinds of things.
Exactly. Those traits were likely seen as indicators of good genes and the ability to provide and protect.
But obviously, those aren't the only factors at play when we're attracted to someone, right?
Definitely not. While evolutionary psychology can help us understand some of our basic drives and preferences, it doesn't capture the full complexity of human relationships.
We're not just cavemen and cavewomen driven purely by instinct. We've got emotions, social connections, personal values, and all sorts of things that play into our choices.
Absolutely. And that's what makes us human.
So we've got this blend of biological drives and social influences shaping our attractions. Where does this leave us in terms of understanding love and relationships?
I think it emphasizes the importance of taking a holistic approach, recognizing the power of biology while also acknowledging the influence of individual experiences, cultural norms, and the choices we make.
So we've got to consider both the science and the art of attraction.
Precisely. Love and relationships are a constant journey of discovery and growth, and understanding all the factors involved can help us navigate that journey with more awareness and intention.
Speaking of journeys, I'm curious about how these biological factors we've been discussing might work in different types of relationships, not just romantic ones.
That's a great question. While a lot of the research has focused on romantic attraction, these principles apply to other relationships as well. For example, the bonding hormones we've talked about, like oxytocin, are also crucial for forming close friendships and family bonds.
So it's not just about romantic love, but about understanding the mechanisms that drive human connection in all its forms.
Exactly. Whether it's the love between parent and child, the bond between close friends, or the spark of attraction between romantic partners, these biological processes are at play.
This deep dive is really changing the way I think about love and attraction.
That's what's so great about scientific exploration. It challenges our assumptions and opens up new ways of seeing ourselves and the world around us.
Okay, so we've explored a lot of fascinating research on the science of attraction. Are there any particular areas that you find especially intriguing, maybe areas that you think are ripe for future research?
There are several areas that I think hold immense potential. One is the study of pheromones, which are chemical signals that animals use to communicate with each other.
Pheromones, like those perfume ads that claim to attract the opposite sex.
Well, those ads might be stretching the truth a bit, but there's definitely evidence that pheromones play a role in animal attraction.
So could we be unconsciously sending out chemical signals that influence how others perceive us? That's a wild thought.
It's a possibility. While the research on human pheromones is still in its early stages, there are some interesting findings suggesting we might be more sensitive to these chemical cues than we realize.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Hmm.
So even our sense of smell might be playing a role in attraction.
Exactly. And this brings us to another exciting area of research, the gut-brain connection. There's a growing body of evidence suggesting that the bacteria in our gut can actually influence our brain chemistry and behavior.
Wait, hold on. Gut bacteria influencing our love lives. That sounds pretty out there.
I know, it's incredible. But studies have shown that the composition of our gut microbiome can impact things like mood, stress levels, and even social behavior.
So you're saying our gut health could be a factor in how attractive we find others or how we behave in relationships.
It's definitely an area that deserves more research, but it's a possibility.
This deep dive has opened up a whole new world of possibilities. The more we learn about the science of attraction, the more questions we seem to have.
That's the nature of scientific inquiry. It's a constant cycle of discovery and exploration, and there's always more to learn.
Okay, I have one last, maybe slightly provocative question before we wrap things up. If we can identify specific biological factors that contribute to attraction and relationship patterns, does that mean we could manipulate them for our own benefit?
That's a question with both exciting and potentially concerning implications. On the one hand, understanding these mechanisms could lead to new therapies or interventions for people struggling with relationship issues or even mental health conditions.
So personalized medicine for our love lives.
Yeah,
That sounds both futuristic and a little scary.
it does, doesn't it? But while that potential is exciting, we also have to carefully consider the ethical implications of potentially manipulating such fundamental aspects of human nature.
It's a slippery slope for sure. We wouldn't want to create a world where people are pressured to conform to certain relationship norms or modify their biology to fit societal expectations.
Exactly. As with any powerful technology, it's crucial to proceed with caution and really think through the potential consequences, both intended and unintended.
This deep dive has given us a lot to think about.
Hmm.
From hormones to epigenetics to the gut-brain connection, it seems like there's no limit to the fascinating connections between our biology and our behavior.
It truly is an incredible field of study and one that's constantly evolving as new discoveries are made.
Well, I'm definitely going to be more aware of all those biological whispers now, especially knowing how much they can influence everything from our preferences to our relationship patterns.
I think that's a great takeaway. As we've seen, understanding those biological underpinnings can give us valuable insights into ourselves and our relationships.
This deep dive has definitely given me a lot to ponder.
I'm glad to hear it. It's always rewarding to spark curiosity and encourage further exploration.
This has been an amazing journey of discovery. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the science of attraction.
It's been my pleasure. I hope you've enjoyed unraveling the mysteries of love, desire, and connection as much as I have.
And for all of you listening, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep. It feels like we could talk about this forever.
Right, there's always more to learn.
Yeah, like it feels like we've just dipped our toes in the water.
Just scratch the surface.
So before we go, I want to make sure we bring this back to like real life.
Yeah, good idea.
Like, what does all this mean for someone who's actually out there, dating and trying to find love?
That's the big question, isn't it?
It is. I mean, we've talked about all this amazing science, but how does it actually apply to our everyday lives?
Well, I think the most important takeaway is that while biology is important, it's not the only thing that matters.
So we're not just puppets controlled by our hormones.
No, not at all. We have the power to make choices, to learn and grow, and to shape our own destinies.
Okay, good, because that was starting to sound a little bleak.
I know, right? It's important to remember that we have agency. We're not just victims of our biology.
But I do think it's helpful to understand those biological influences. Like knowing how those hormones and brain circuits work can help us make more informed choices.
Absolutely. It's all about self-awareness. The more we understand ourselves, the better equipped we are to create the relationships we want.
And even if we didn't have the best start in life or if we're struggling with certain patterns, there's still hope for change, right?
Yes, definitely. We can learn new skills, develop healthier habits, and work through past traumas.
It's like rewiring those old circuits,
Yeah, exactly. And there are lots of tools and resources out there to help us do that.
like therapy, for example.
Right. Therapy can be incredibly valuable for understanding our attachment styles and developing more secure ways of relating to others.
And mindfulness practices can help too, just becoming more present and aware of our thoughts and feelings,
That's a big one. Mindfulness can help us recognize those hot and cold states we talked about earlier, those moments when we're driven by impulse versus reason.
right? It's like developing that internal pause button, giving ourselves a moment to reflect before reacting on autopilot.
Exactly. And that can make a huge difference in how we handle those challenging moments in relationships.
So it's not just about understanding the science, but also about applying those insights to our own lives.
Right. It's about using that knowledge to create more fulfilling and authentic connections.
And I think that's a beautiful message. It's not just about romantic relationships either, is it?
No, not at all. These principles apply to all kinds of relationships, friendships, family relationships, even our relationship with ourselves.
It's about understanding what it means to be human in all its complexity.
Exactly. And appreciating the incredible power of connection.
Well, this has been an amazing conversation.
I've really enjoyed it.
Me too.
Mm,
I feel like we've just scratched the surface, but it's given me so much to think about,
that's what we hope for.
to spark curiosity and inspire further exploration.
Exactly. Because the journey of understanding ourselves and our relationships is a lifelong one.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the science of attraction.
It's been my pleasure. And to all of you listening, keep those questions coming and keep diving deep.